Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Victor Muposhi. I'm going to be talking about reimagining an inclusive and sustainable wildlife economy and looking at the challenges, lessons, and opportunities for Zimbabwe. For the presentation, I'm going to look at conservation and sustainability issues, the challenges and the threats, and then I'll look at the aspirations, focusing on the wildlife economy and taking a leaf from Agenda 2063. I'll then try to unpack the concept of wildlife economy, of course, with a special focus on Zimbabwe, and then look at the different possible areas of interest to Zimbabwe when it relates or comes to the wildlife economy, and then finally look at the opportunities and pathways for sustainability. In general, a lot of lessons have been learned. In South Africa, you're looking at Rwanda, you're looking at Seychelles, you're looking at Gabon, and yes, of course, a lot of lessons are being taken from all these countries based on the different case studies that were done and looking at the state of our wildlife economy in Africa. Africa's economic potential lies in its biodiversity and wildlife economy, and therefore provides a unique competitive advantage for fighting poverty and building resilient communities, especially now under global environmental change and the external threats that we have, uncertainties that we are facing today. Think of COVID, you think of the droughts, you think of the flooding and the cyclones that we are also experiencing. So a lot of resilience is needed by the communities, and the wildlife economy itself can actually provide that cushion, can provide the resilience, can support communities to being resilient to all these external shocks. And CITES itself acknowledges that where economic value can be attached to wildlife and a controlled management system is implemented, we create favorable conditions that can result in investments in conservation and therefore promote sustainable use of natural resources, thus reducing the risk to wildlife from alternative forms of land use. If I'm going to show you a map of Zimbabwe later on, and the conservation areas vis-a-vis, rural or communal areas. You notice that whenever a particular piece of land does not have much value, or people are not getting much value from a certain piece of land, they would prefer to convert that piece of land into a different or alternative land use option in order for them to actually get or derive benefit from it. And therefore, in this case, CITES acknowledges that we need to place a value to wildlife, and whenever we place a value to wildlife, it actually promotes the protection or the conservation of that particular species by actually also looking at the habitats or the landscape itself, because there are threats, of course, indeed, that relates to possible changes in land use options, that therefore threatens the existence of wildlife, because if the habitats are destroyed, and then we lose wildlife. And Zimbabwe is well known for its vast wildlife resources and has enormous opportunities for economic development. And therefore, this brings our attention to the concept of reimagining a wildlife economy in Zimbabwe, taking advantage of the resources that we there. But when we look at that, it is very critical to make sure that whenever we talk about a wildlife economy, the issues to do with environmental integrity or ecosystem integrity should be key. The issues of sustainability should be fundamental. Issues of ensuring that nature is there to support the current and the future generations are supposed to be at the center stage. But at the same time, everything that we then do is supposed to ensure responsibility. We have to do all these things responsibly. So that is very important, and that is very critical. Um, and looking at Zimbabwe itself, there is over harvesting of wood that results in habitat loss and fragmentation. There is wildlife crime, and that results also in the decline in wildlife populations. Because of the habitat loss and habitat fragmentation, an increase in population or human population has also resulted in some human and wildlife conflicts in some of the areas, and resulted in the persecution of the wildlife, or also the death or mortality in terms of the species or the wildlife itself. So it is very, very critical to acknowledge some of these challenges and areas that possibly people can intervene in terms of management, in terms of financial support, or financing. So we also acknowledge that in Zimbabwe there are fragmented and weak policy frameworks. In some cases, there are certain issues that are still sticky and thorny that needs to be addressed. You're looking at unsustainable agricultural practices and the expansion itself that also results in human and wildlife conflicts, also that results in habitat loss or fragmentation. We also have many other challenges that are there. Talk of mining and other extractive industries. There are a lot of cases in Zimbabwe or in some of the protected areas looking at Wangi National Park, close to Sinamatela. You're looking at Manapus National Park. People have always been having battles in terms of fighting issues that relates to mining in protected areas. Look at Umfurudzi Safari area. All these are issues that actually affect conservation, but in actual sense also provide an opportunity to reflect and look at how best can Zimbabwe be able to benefit from its natural resources. But in other words, we can actually look at it from a different angle and say that our aspiration, despite all these challenges, economic emancipation, poverty alleviation, environmental justice, and sustainable development, at the end of the day, we are keen and interested in making sure that we are able to support and be able to build an economy based on the natural resource that we have in Zimbabwe. And so if you look at this map, this shows a network of protected areas in Zimbabwe, and safari areas, and also some conservancies. Here you have Save Valley Conservancy, you have also Malilangwe, and all. And all these protected areas, they are surrounded by what we refer to as campfire areas, and also communities. So you find that most of the protected areas in Zimbabwe, they are like islands. They are surrounded by people, and these people, they are hungry for land. They need land, and so it is a very big challenge as well to Zimbabweans. But that also provides a platform for us to talk about building a resilient economy that is based on wildlife. And our aspirations is that we need to make sure that we support and promote a sustainable and fair, equitable use of genetic resources, so that we have clean air, and better health. But most importantly, here we are interested in making sure that we should be able to invest in infrastructure and develop and support renewable energy. But at the end of the day, you notice that Agenda 63 is somehow hinged on biodiversity, it's somehow hinged on our ecosystems and our ability to be able to tap into nature and benefit from nature. Um, So, if we're looking at a wildlife economy in Africa, it provides a vast, opportunity, contributes to sustainable development, sustainable growth, enterprises, and livelihoods of people, basing on biological capital. So, if you're looking at tourism itself, its contribution to GDP in Africa, in different countries, it is enormous. So we can look at it in the sense that the wildlife economy itself can actually be something that we can base our GDP and economic growth to ensure that at the end of the day, whatever that we do supports sustainability, supports the conservation networks that are well are protected, that have high value, and of which we are able also to tap and get economic value at the end of the day. And now it is very critical to also consider and look at the opportunities that are there. But we're looking at ecosystem services and payment for ecosystem services. But for us to be able to tap into all these things, we need diverse and nested institutions and to promote adaptive governance, and also to make sure that we move away from isolated institutions and stakeholders to promoting partnerships among multiple stakeholders whenever it comes to issues to do with wildlife economy engagement issues. In terms of a transformation or the transformation for a wildlife economy, I've developed a concept or a conceptual framework where we are talking about change management, because for people to be able to achieve this in Zimbabwe, there has to be change management, and this can actually take into advantage the theories of change and all theories of learning, looking at the different societal values, the different belief systems that are there. There are those that support sustainable use. There are those that do not support it. And so we should be able to learn from each other. So I'm saying that we must be able to learn from each other, and in the process, to have a proper and solid wildlife economy, we need a resource, which is what we are referring here to as ecosystem goods and services. And we also need policy instruments from international, national, that governs all this. But we also need diverse and nested institutions that promote adaptive management. But more importantly, the initiatives that are supposed to be, knit together include issues to do with conservation partnerships and investments, looking at land use planning, habitat management, sustainable wildlife population or sustained wildlife populations, because without these wildlife populations, we cannot talk much about a wildlife economy. But we also need to consider the communities themselves and issues to do with conflict resolution. And then we can then look at the big five in terms of, based on the status of wildlife economy in Africa, by Sue and team. They look at 5 broad key aspects of the wildlife economy, looking at ranching, looking at carbon offsets, looking at hunting, looking at issues like ecotourism, and possibly we can bring in issues to do with the bioprospecting as well. And so these are issues, these are opportunities that we can talk of. But in order for us to benefit and get all these things, and we need to make sure that there is enough research to provide baseline information, to provide data, to provide information for adaptive management, and we need to then bridge that policy science and gap, a policy gap, in order for us to make sure that everything that we do is based on sound scientific principles and values, and therefore, if we are able to then knit all this together, we will then definitely get the conservation and economic outcomes that we so much desire from a wildlife economy. And the lessons learned from South Africa is that with ranching, everything is possible, the wildlife activities, the wildlife products, etc. And so there are a lot of opportunities that people can get from a wildlife economy. And so these are the 5 broad categories or areas that are critical, that are important. So in Zimbabwe, you find that ecotourism or tourism itself is something that is already there. It is established. Hunting and fishing is something that is already there. The carbon markets, yes, of course, we have the RED Plus projects and all that are becoming more pronounced in terms of their reach in Zimbabwe in certain areas, but a lot of work needs to be done. And we have forestry products or non-timber forestry products. Is there quite a number of NGOs and organizations that are beginning to add value to natural forestry products? And then, of course, game ranching, there's a lot that needs to be done from a well-developed ranching ecosystem or network that used to be there back in the 90s that was destroyed when we had the land reform and the wildlife-based land reform later in 2004, and so that requires a lot of effort and work in order for people to be able to realize the wildlife economy. Yes, these are established in Zimbabwe, but they are done in isolation, and so therefore, for a proper wildlife economy, you need therefore institutions that brings this together to make sure that there are coordinated efforts to ensure that we are able to gate and attain the values that we want. There are a number of alternatives that or considerations that we need. We need to facilitate transformation. We need to start driving growth through promoting value and products. We also need to create an enabling environment for the wildlife sector as well. And in terms of information and the activities and the stakeholders that are needed, obviously you have the government, you have the private sector, you have communities, you have support sectors, your research institutions, your universities, and etc. All these are supposed to work together to support the planning, the implementation, the adaptive management, the monitoring and evaluation of the implementation. So where are we as Zimbabwe? Zimbabwe, yes, of course, all these players are there, but they need to be brought together. The good thing is that Zimbabwe has started working on this, and the Ministry of Environment and Tourism has actually launched a project to look at the status of the biodiversity economy in Zimbabwe, and also looking at the natural capital accounting in Zimbabwe, which is coordinated by African Wildlife Foundation, Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, and then Anchor Environment, which is a South African consultants company. And looking at all these things and where we are, I'm looking at the baseline and the progress to make sure that we are aware of where the country is, and then bring all the stakeholder groupings together in order for people to be aware and then to start moving forward on the next steps.